Good,
So,
good morning, everyone. We are so excited to see so many people joining us today. Um, Welcome to Sisters in Crime Atlanta's Off the Shelf. And this is an exciting off the shelf
Mhm.
for us for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is our first off the shelf of 2024, and it is our fourth year, which is hard for me to believe that we've been doing this for 4 years already. And the third reason that this is exciting for me today is our guest author. I am so excited to have Deborah Mitchell with us. She is a fellow Sisters in Crime Atlanta chapter member, and she has written her debut novel. And we love having a debut author on this program because the goal is for us to get our reader audience to pick up these books and read them and get them off the shelf, which is how Charlie and I came up with the name of this program. He was instrumental in helping me name it. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I would really like to encourage you to participate in the conversation. Please feel free to chime in to ask a question, or you can put your question in the chat. We're going to do our best to keep an eye on that. I've got Charlie keeping an eye on it, and ask Sharon to keep an eye on it as well, just to make sure we don't miss anything. Or the other thing you can do, and I'm not good at this, but I believe under reactions at the bottom of the screen, if you click that, it'll say raise hand, and that'll alert me that you want to ask a question, and I can call on you. So whatever you are most comfortable with. So let's go ahead and get started, and let me tell you a little bit more about our author. Her name is Deborah Mitchell. She was born and raised in Canada. She started her career as a marketing manager at a large Canadian oil company. A self-proclaimed midlife crisis at age 30 compelled her to enter veterinarian school. After graduating 5 years later at age 35 and desperate to escape the winter climate, she moved to South Florida to begin her veterinarian career. She has since worked in busy veterinarian hospitals in the Miami and Washington, D.C. areas before moving to Georgia a decade ago to start her own veterinarian house call practice. Her debut novel is a cozy mystery titled Trust the Terrier. It's adorable if you haven't seen it. Trust the Terrier. It was released less than a month ago in late December and has been met with glowing reviews. She is a member of Atlanta Writers Club, as well as a member of two Sister in Crime chapters, the Atlanta chapter, where she serves on the board and is our chapter secretary. And she's also a member of the Florida Gulf Coast chapter. So welcome, Deborah.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
So I always like to start our session by asking our author to tell us a little bit about themselves, their backstory, so to speak, and to tell us something about you that we're not necessarily going to learn by reading your bio on your book jacket. So take it away.
Okay. Well, as Dawn said, I did grow up in Canada. I grew up in the Niagara region, so right near Niagara Falls on the other side of Buffalo. So go Bills if you're cheering for the Buffalo Bills this weekend. And I did, it was the 80s when I went to university. I think it was the decade of greed is good. Everyone seemed to be going into a business degree, and I just thought that was what I should do. And I had a good career at Petro-Canada for 6 years. And it wasn't really a midlife crisis. And it seems like all those moments of big change have come about in a rather like whimsical moment. I was on a beach vacation with one of my best friends, and we both were almost 30, similar careers, similar education. And we were sitting on the beach talking with each other, and I just leaned to her and said, "What would you do if you could do it all over again?" And she decided she wanted to be an interior designer. And I said out loud, oh, I think I want to be a veterinarian. And I had actually never voiced it before. I mean, we'd had animals in our life since I was a kid. I was always bringing home some dog I would find in the neighborhood. So a love of animals was always there, but it had never come to me to go to vet school. So I came home from that trip and I had to ask all my friends, do you know where the vet schools are in Canada? I had no idea. We only have 4 in Canada. And so I found my way to the admissions counselor and figured out what I needed to do to apply. And it took me a year to get all those science prerequisites, and I was able to get in. So it's sort of the next step in my career, that veterinary part came about in such a random manner. But obviously, it probably should have been the pathway I took early on. You know, we didn't have the type of guidance counselors kids today have, it seems, but maybe I would have found my way there sooner. But I was happy to be there. So I graduated when I was 35. And it was at the time I had an epiphany that I really don't like winter. And with my degree, I could pretty much work anywhere. So I started just looking, where could I go that's warm, but I could still be mentored as a young veterinarian. So I think I had job offers in Scottsdale, the Valley of California. I had one in Guam and then Miami. So I chose Miami, and that's where I ended up. I didn't choose Guam when I found out that they had clocked the highest land speed wind records for typhoons, and that they had the highest per capita population of snakes. And so that was like, yeah, no, that's a little too far away.
Oh, it's funny because one of the things that I have learned about you in reading your bios is that you are a small animal veterinarian. And so at first I was like, well, what does that mean? And one of the things that crossed my mind was like, cats, dogs,
Yeah.
snakes, gerbils, like, but you just said that the high population of snakes was a
Yeah.
deterrent. So probably not.
No, small animal just means, I mean, we divide it by small and large. So large is cows, goats, horses, and
Mhm.
small is usually cats and dogs. We
Mhm.
call all the little pocket pets and snakes and birds the exotics practice, but that comes under small animal medicine. So you have to do it all when you're at vet school. You don't get to
Mhm.
choose. You get as much cows and horses as you do cats and dogs.
Mhm. So I think it's really such a leap of faith that very inspiring to me because you're 30 years old, you're pretty much established in your career and the career path that you chose, working in marketing, and then you decided to make a change. And I'm kind of curious, what aside from applying to vet schools, what else did you have to do in order to dedicate your time to studying to be a veterinarian? I mean, you were established you had a career going at the time, imagining you were very independent. So,
Hmm. I don't know, you think about it, and the weekend that I had to move to the city that the vet school is located was a weekend I lost my company car, I lost my income, I moved, I got a puppy, and I now had a bicycle as a form of transportation. And I don't think I was ever happier.
oh,
You just know when something's right. And if you add all they always have those lists of high stress items that happen in life. And I think I did 3 of them on the one weekend. Um, and again, I was never happier. So it was a simple decision once it came to me. But the fact that I hadn't really voiced it out loud or even inside of my own thoughts until it came out of my mouth at age 29. So yeah.
and
But as soon as I said it, I was just like a light bulb went off. Well, why don't I go to vet school? And my friend did go back to school for interior design too.
mhm. Yeah. Well, I just know that for me,
Mhm.
I would, in order to quit a job and to now pursue something that's going to take up a significant amount of time, that's a scary step.
Right.
And it can be a deterrent. It can be somebody saying, you know what, I missed that boat and I'm just going to stay on this path that I started and it is what it is. But you didn't do that.
No, no. Like I said, when it came to me, it was sort of black and white in my mind. It was an easy decision. So I
Mhm.
did ask for a leave of absence from my company because you never know, and they were willing to give it to me. So I was able to take a 1 year leave of absence just in case it didn't work out, but it did. So
It did.
yeah.
And one more thing about just about vet schools, because you said there was only 4 in Canada at the time. And I have a friend whose daughter was interested in going, this is recent, interested in going to veterinarian school. She's worked with vets throughout high school. She studied biology and chemistry in college with every intention of going on to vet school. And she could not
Mm,
get into a program. So it seems like it's a limited program now. I don't know if it was at the time, but it
yeah,
is now, and it's very difficult.
it is. I think it's still harder to get into than med school.
Wow, that is amazing. And so,
Mhm.
so look at you now. So here you are. You have had, let's talk about where you are now. Okay,
Okay.
so you moved to Georgia. I Now I understand going to South Florida. You were trying to
Right.
get away from the cold, the winter cold, which before we go there, I saw a headline today that said bitter cold in Atlanta. And I'm like, Deborah, is it bitter cold in Atlanta to you?
Well, I did leave the country because I had no tolerance for cold anymore. But deep down inside, I still have the ability to suck it up and deal with it. I have a friend on the call here who I'm sure is in much colder weather than we are in Atlanta today. So my brother lives in the Canadian Rockies and he thinks minus 20 Celsius would be dreamy. So it's all relative. The blood does run thin.
S- So you went from one extreme temperature to another. South Florida
Mm.
is very, very warm. I know that's where I grew up. I grew up in Miami. And then you went to DC,
Mhm.
to the Northern Virginia area, and then you came to Georgia. What brought you to Georgia?
When I moved to Florida, I ended up meeting my husband, and 6 years later, he had a job opportunity in the DC area, and I was ready for a change. I have a little bit of wanderlust, so I'm every 5 or 6 years, it's some form of itch. I'm not sure where. I just seem to moving is okay. So we moved to Alexandria, Virginia, and we were there for 7 years. And then he had another job opportunity and took us here. It got us closer to his family. My family are all so far away. So at the time, my daughter was 2, and just to have her be near family was also a big priority for us. But so that was 11 years ago. I'm kind of past my 6 year itch so
You
far.
have. So do
Yeah.
you think you're gonna stick around for a bit? Do you like it enough here?
Yeah, I don't feel an itch to scratch yet. So we are empty nesters though, so all of a sudden the house seems
Mhm.
big, but
Yeah.
time will tell.
So I want to talk a little bit about
Mhm.
your idea to start the house call veterinarian business.
Mhm.
Like what led you down that path instead of just joining another veterinarian existing program?
I worked in very busy hospitals for 14 years. And just before we moved here, I actually got certified in veterinary acupuncture. It's a thing. And it's often done in older dogs with poor mobility. And so that's best served as a house call because you're not having to get that old dog into the car and out of the car. And then the stress of a vet visit makes it difficult. So I thought, well, maybe as I'm certified now, I could provide that service as a house call. But I love medicine. And I just couldn't imagine pulling into a vet hospital and working for someone else again and starting all over. So, with my daughter as a young student and just wanting to be flexible with my schedule, it seemed to be an easy decision to start my own practice. So I could do veterinary acupuncture and house call. I could do medicine that I love and on my terms.
And so current day, you're in Atlanta, you are running a practice, your own veterinarian practice, and you've married, you've got a daughter, and you have your own pets, you're very, very busy. And somewhere along the way in all of this, you decided to start writing. Tell
Mhm.
us about how that all began.
Well, it's not my background. It's not something I used to do as a kid. That would be my brother, the kid who always wrote the 8-page stories in elementary school when you only needed to write one. That wasn't me. But when I was working in Virginia, it was a busy hospital, and sometimes if it was busy and there was no appointments, the client would drop their pet off. And so the first veterinarian that had a break in their schedule would pull the record and examine the pet and evaluate and make a treatment plan. So that day there was a cat that had been dropped off. And that cat, I was the first person to pull the record. And so I looked at it. It was a new client to the hospital. And the cat's name was Mick Nassau. So Mick, and the last family name was Nassau. And I said out loud to the vet tech I was working with, I said, if I ever write a mystery, this is going to be the name of my detective. This is like the best name. And the cat's personality matched the name. He was the coolest cat. So when the clients came to pick their cat up at the end of the day, I said to them, if in the future, if it's okay with you, can I use your cat's name as the name of my detective? And again, it was the first time I'd ever voiced out loud, if I ever write a mystery, this would be my detective's name. So almost like that moment where I voiced out loud, oh, what do you want to be when you do it all over again, would be a vet. So I hadn't really thought it before. And then it kind of ruminated for about a decade, to be honest with you. I remember I sitting somewhere and just starting to write notes, and because that name just stuck. I couldn't shake the name. And a year would go by and I'd be sitting somewhere reading a mystery and think about Mick Nassau and what could Mick Nassau's character be like. And it was probably almost a decade later. I was turning 50. So almost like the 30-year-old crisis. This was the almost 50-year-old crisis. And I actually bought a book. I don't have it anymore, like a book about how to write a book. And I took it on my 50th birthday trip with my sister and I started reading it. And then it just kept slowly ruminating until one day I decided I would give it a go. I didn't have a laptop. So for Christmas, my husband bought me a laptop and I rented Mary Kay Andrews' beach house in Tybee Island. It was January, so it was affordable. I went down for a couple days and figured out how to use my writing program and literally just decided what it would feel like to write first words or write first storyline ideas. So I went away for a couple days to do that. And Mary Kay Andrews is my favorite cozy author. I love her books. So her space was very inspiring. Even in the bedroom we rented, there was pictures of all her books on the wall. She had an old-fashioned typewriter sitting on a desk in the sunroom. It was just an inspired space. And so that's where it began.
Okay. How on earth did you find out that you could rent her house?
Oh, well, actually, she did I already read all of her books as they would come out. Every May I sit and wait for the Mary Kay Andrews book to come out. And I was in my library with my daughter in the Milton Public Library near here, and I saw that she was going to be there for a book event. So I dragged my daughter back with me to go to it. And I actually introduced myself and told her that I had rented her beach house. And that's where I wrote my first words. So I think she talked about it because she is a salvager. And in her book, she has characters that are out in antiques and antiquing. So I think that's where I've heard about it, was her talking about it at some other event. So, yeah.
So when you rented it, you had mentioned that you had rented a room. So did you get the whole house?
Yeah, the whole house.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. And how long were you there?
3 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And that was the jumping off point.
That was
Okay.
it was in January. I got my new laptop for Christmas. I decided what writing program I wanted to try to use to organize my thoughts.
Okay.
And got into the car and drove to Mary Kay Andrews' beach house on Tybee Island, and that was the beginning. And so that first book I wrote is not published, and it does feature the character Mick Nassau. He's a younger Harrison Ford, I guess you'd picture. And it's the story of a murder hidden in the aftermath of a hurricane set in Key West. I always thought a hurricane would be a great place to hide a crime since there's so much destruction after the fact. And that probably came about living in South Florida during a bunch of hurricanes. But so I did write that story. I love that storyline, but I didn't know anything about writing at the time. So it's sitting, waiting for me to get back to it and edit it. But McNassau hopefully one day sees print.
I know that and this might be the same book, that there was a book that you wrote or
Mhm.
a story that you had going and you submitted it and you got some feedback that
Right.
that surprised you.
So in my story, I titled it Untied Lines. The character is forced into early retirement by a corrupt Florida governor. And he's a special agent by training and an investigative agent. And now he's out of work and retired and doesn't know what to do with himself. And he ends up visiting a friend in Key West. So at the time, I thought I was writing a cozy mystery. And what I thought was that because he wasn't working as a professional, that it was a cozy, because cozies feature amateur sleuths. And so I had spent, I don't know, a year and a half to 2 years writing this story, attending conferences, attempting pitch sessions with agents and editors, and getting a little bit of interest. And I finally saw an editor from Kensington Books. And it was, I think, a Yahoo video, and she represents cozy mysteries. And I thought, well, I can submit directly to her. I'll do that. And she replied to me quite quickly. And she was very kind. And she said, I like your story, but it's not a cozy. And if you ever do write a cozy mystery, and at that time, the McNassau story featured a stray dog. She goes, if you ever write a cozy mystery featuring a dog, I might be interested in that. And so I sat back and thought, it's not a cozy? And I had no idea. I mean, I was so new to this world. I literally had to go to Google and figure out where I was wrong in my definition of my own genre. And so I sat back and thought, do I rewrite it or keep submitting it? Or should I write a cozy mystery featuring a dog? And of course, all the groups that you go to and the advice you get is to write what you know. So I sat back and thought about it for a while and decided to write a cozy mystery featuring a dog. And that's when I started writing Trust the Terrier. So again, I came about through, I guess, my own being unaware of what I was doing, and having someone who could have not replied to me whatsoever or been curt in her reply. She was kind and constructive, I guess is the best word. So it's like, okay, I need to get back to my version of school and figure out what I'm doing.
And so you've said a lot about like attending conferences and sort of educating yourself along the way prior to knowing about the cozy
Right.
designation. But what kind of things did you do? Because you're still working during this time.
Yes.
You're still running your business.
Right.
And so I'm curious about how long, like where are we in the number of years or
Right.
timeline, as well as what kind of things you were doing outside of your job to to prepare for this, to prepare
Right.
for the actual publishing opportunity.
When I went to Mary Kay Andrews beachside cottage, I started looking online for writing groups or critique groups or trying to figure out how I could surround myself with people to learn from. I even looked into taking courses. Um, and that's when I discovered the Sisters in Crime and the Atlanta Writers Club. And so Sisters in Crime provided for me a group of people who love mysteries and thrillers as much as I do, but probably the most supportive community of people. And it's such a safe place for me to be to learn about the industry and about writing. And the Atlanta Writers Club provided opportunities not only for lectures monthly, just to learn about the industry and to learn about the craft of writing, but their conferences gave you an opportunity for speaking directly to editors and agents and publishers. So every conference I went to, there was two a year, I would get a little bit further along in the process. So maybe the first time I would have someone ask me for a few extra pages of my book, and maybe the next conference they would ask for the manuscript. Each time was just one baby step more successful than the time before. So I just kept working at it. But that's basically how I have, educated myself, I guess, as best I can, with the industry and with the writing world. I think the first memory I have is at a Sisters in Crime meeting. It was almost the very first meeting I attended, and it was First Pages. So we would get together and all of us would share 3 to 5 pages of our written word out loud to our peers in the room. And I've never been so nervous in my life than reading those pages. And I almost didn't do it, which isn't like me to withdraw from a moment like that, but I was terrified. And all of you were so supportive and encouraging and helpful and constructive that, every time you go through an experience like that, you get a little bit more confident about putting yourself out there. And to the point now, I'm happy to receive feedback. It's not that you have to get thick skin, but I think you just have to work through your own phobias about putting your word out there and having it be judged. But thank you, Sisters in Crime, for that.
Well,
It was
Deborah,
scary.
I remember that. If
Yeah.
it's the same one I'm thinking of, I
Yeah.
remember that. And if I'm remembering correctly, it was the Mick Nassau
Yeah, it
story,
was.
because I
Mhm.
remember the hurricane
Yeah.
in Florida and all that. And I remember, like, I couldn't wait for the rest of it. It really came across as something interesting and intriguing. And then, we went through the pandemic, and we weren't seeing each other. And then once we got through all that and you and I started to see each other once again, I was like, how's your book? Or I can't wait to read your book. And you're like, I can't wait to finish writing it or something, because I think by that time you had to take a different
Yeah.
direction.
I
Yeah.
think I set it aside at some point, and decided to try the cozy mystery route. And
Mhm.
that was before the pandemic. And I started writing, probably had 5 chapters done when the pandemic hit. And during that year and a half, I don't quite remember it. It seems very foggy and vague, but I was very, very busy. And whatever that did to the rest of the world, it just took away any creative energy I had. So I didn't write for a year and a half. And I didn't even reread my novel, the Mick Nassau novel. It took me like 4 years till I reread that. So all of a sudden, I don't even remember the day, but it was coming post-vaccine, coming out of the pandemic, where one day I just sat back down in front of my computer and started writing. And then I finished Trust the Terrier quite quickly, actually. But there was a year and a half where I don't even know if I read during that time. I don't think I
Mhm.
did anything much, but
I understand, because like you
yeah.
said, you were still busy,
Yes.
because you still, people still need their pets cared for.
Yeah.
Um, just on a personal note, we changed vets during the pandemic because of how they were having to operate during the pandemic, and
Right.
we couldn't get our pet in and sit outside in the car
Right.
for hours, and they'll call you, and having a sick pet and not being able to get them, seen, and having them in more distress sitting in a car for hours.
Yeah.
I just had to find another vet, and I drive like 20 miles away
Right.
now.
That's why I was busier during that time. People wanted to be with their pets,
Yeah.
and having them taken from them in the car was
Hmm.
not ideal. So
Yeah.
they would call the house call vet to come to them.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
mhm.
So, you mentioned a writing program that you decided that I guess after doing some research into different programs, which one did you end up going with?
I write on Scrivener, so I write the whole
Oh,
novel on
yeah.
Scrivener, and then when I'm
Hmm.
done and I'm about to shop it out to friends and family for first reads, I switch it over to Word, and then I'll edit in Word from that point on. But Scrivener is like having a big giant scrapbook. You have all these little pockets you can put pieces of information. It's all in one place. I find it. It's not the easiest program to learn up front, but I like it the best. So I
Hmm.
still do that.
Yeah, I've heard positive things
Yeah.
about that program. So, you also mentioned that the Kensington
Yes.
publisher, is that the route that you ended up going when you did write Trust the Terrier?
No, so I had finished Trust the Terrier and I had attended Atlanta Writers Conference, and it was my most successful conference. I had everyone asking for the full manuscript. I had two publishers ask for the full manuscript, and I won a Best Pitch Award at the conference, which was like a little kid getting a star on your homework. It was like I hadn't received an award for 30 years. It was so excited. And so I had submitted my manuscript to those publishers. And in the interim, I was looking at independent publishers because they were smaller independent publishers I had submitted to that do take direct submission without an agent. I didn't have an agent. And during that time, I was attending at the Milton Public Library again, another author event by our local George Weinstein and Kim Conry were doing a book event. And somebody in the audience asked Kim where she got her publishing contract. And so she talked about this company, Black Rose Writing. And I remember sending myself a text or an email during the lecture, like Black Rose Writing. And I came home and checked them out, and they do take direct submission. I submitted to them, and they signed the book. So I was torn. I got both contracts from one of the publishers I met at the conference. She offered me a 2-book contract, and then the Black Rose contract, all in the same week. And the first confirmation I got on the first contract, I was driving to see a client in North Georgia, and I pulled into a Chick-fil-A to get some lemonade, which I'm obsessed with. And from ordering to picking up at the window, I read my email offering me a book contract. And I started crying and screaming, and I don't know, I was overwhelmed. So by the time I got around to the window to pick up my drink, I was still in this state, and I had to clarify. I thought he would think I was under some duress or he was going to call the police on me. I had to explain, and it was some kid. He rolled his eyes at me, handed me my lemonade, and off I went. I thought I startled him a little bit at first.
Another day in his life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's probably
That
like,
was a year ago that I got that contract.
wow. Okay,
Mhm.
so you said you got 2. How did
Yes.
you decide which one to go with, and what was your thought process?
The other one was for the 2 books, which was tempting. I chose Black Rose Writing while they're a small independent press, they have really good marketing. And thankfully, I had local author friends. They were members of the Atlanta Writers Club, and one of them is a member of Sisters in Crime, who are also published by them. So I was able to ask them how they felt about their relationship, so being able to have someone that you knew that could provide you with honest feedback made the decision easy for me. So I'm happy.
Okay, so one thing I'm still not clear on is, how do you find time to write, or just talking about your first book right now,
Right.
the one that's published, Trust the Terrier. How did you find time in your busy life how do you make time to actually work on this?
It's tough. So anyone who's got a career and is writing, I'm not really good at having a set schedule. A lot of these writing groups have write-ins where at the same time every day everyone joins to write, and I don't even think that'll ever be possible for me. I have no 2 days are the same. But thankfully, I'm a morning person. So I'll be up before dawn usually. And so I'll often write in the morning first thing for an hour or 2 and then start my day. And because my day is flexible, there's gaps in the schedule. But in general, I find if I'm not doing it in the morning, it's not going to happen. So that's how I start my day. And often if I'm getting to a point where I just want to dedicate some time to it, or if I'm going through a last edit, I do have to pull myself away from work and just sequester myself. So it's just too hard. There's too many distractions. I don't say no when someone's calling for an appointment. So I just have to pretend I'm away or go away.
Right, actually leave,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about Trust the Terrier.
Yes.
And we do have a comment from Linda. She loves the cover, as do I. This is
Yeah.
adorable.
Yes, it did.
Tell us tell us about your story, but don't give too much away because,
Okay.
like we said, the goal is for us to want to go buy this book and get it off the shelf and read it.
Essentially, it's a story of a young female veterinarian. And that's not me because I was never a young female veterinarian since I graduated when I was 35. I guess that's young, but not,
Yeah.
not 20s. Who finds a dead body on a house call. And no, I've never found a dead body on a house call. But I always thought that would be an interesting premise. So that's basically how Dr. Emily Benton, the young female veterinarian, gets involved in the mystery. And like any good cozy, she's a nosy amateur sleuth. She's independent. She's tenacious. And so the mystery ensues. When she arrives at the house, she finds her client dead, but her dog in a state of distress. And that dog is the cover dog on the book. His name is Elvis. And she, of course, brings him into her home while they're trying to sort out where he should be. And the two end up, repeatedly putting themselves in danger while they investigate the crime.
Like a good cozy, as you said.
Yes, like a good cozy. And of course, her brother is the sheriff's deputy in town, and her new love interest is the new detective in town. And her best friend, confidant, partner in crime is her high school best friend, who's now her hospital manager and head vet tech, Anthony.
Mhm.
So those are all the main characters of the story.
Is there, aside from your main character being a veterinarian and you
Right.
being a veterinarian,
Yeah.
are there any other similarities with your characters and your stories to real life?
The biggest one would be Anthony. So Anthony in the story is Anthony, my vet tech I worked with in Miami for the first 6 years. We had a unique situation for a vet hospital that we were a team. So if you came as a client with your pet to see me for an appointment, you would also always see Anthony. And that's not very common in a vet hospital. I thought it was quite cutting edge at the time. I think half the time the clients came to see Anthony, and then they got me as the vet on the side. But how his character is physically described in the book and a lot of the personality traits are Anthony. So when I started writing the book, I reached out to him. He's still in the Miami area. And I said, I'm writing this mystery and my character I want to name him Anthony, and he's going to look like you and kind of be like you. Is that all right? And he's like, yeah, sure. And flash ahead 3 years later, last February, when I got the book contract, I reached back out to him. I'm like, so remember 3 years ago when I asked you if I could use your name and likeness in a book? Well, now or never, because you're going to be in a book. And so he's all excited. He's like, sure, no problem. So Anthony is Anthony. He's fairly accurate with some, literary license in there.
Mhm.
I guess the other thing that's very similar is that in a normal cozy mystery, if you've read cozy mysteries, they're often the cookie shop mystery or the flower shop mystery. They'll have a theme, and the food-based ones will often have a recipe at the end of the chapter. There's always recipes in a cozy, but what I do instead for mine is through the story, I integrate real life cases that I saw in the veterinary hospital. And they're amusing cases, there's nothing sad or life threatening that goes on in a cozy. But so that would be the other thing is I have some real life patients that I've integrated into funny cases that come in. And so some of them I've asked the client, can I put you and your dog in my story? And of course, they're ecstatic. And then I start getting, texts of pictures of every puppy picture and cute picture they've ever had in case they want to use them on the cover, as if I'm designing the cover. So with probably about every other chapter, there's a funny little case of a pet that comes into the hospital. So that's how I integrate that cozy theme of the veterinary hospital within the story. Is with true life cases. A few of them are made up and some of them are mashups. So I might have the pet name, but the case is unrelated, but they're all cases I actually saw in hospitals. So the fish hook in the lip, and there's others in there, but
Mhm.
there are real life cases.
So what about your main character and
Mhm.
like how you describe her and any influence there?
Yes, the main character is a redhead, um, Scottish redhead, actually. This is my daughter. She'll kill me for showing her picture. But I come from a long line of redheads, so I don't know. I'd never even thought about it twice. Emily Benton was going to be a redhead. So she lives on the beach, which is my dream, to live on the beach. And so I guess those are the similarities.
So, also, I found it interesting, and is it common vet practice
Mhm.
that the way that the doctors or the business identifies a pet is by the pet's name and then the surname of the owner? Is that normal, or is
Yeah,
that
that
just something you do?
it's very normal, and I think a lot of people find it very strange because they never refer to their own pet as Fluffy Mitchell or whatever it might be. But in a vet hospital, we always refer to our patient, your pet, by their first name and their last name. And that's how their chart is filed. So I know my husband gets a kick out of this. I'll be calling a specialist or trying to refer a patient in, and I'm on the phone, and it'd be like, oh, I'd like to make a referral for, Moose Inglewood. And my husband will sit there and like chuckle because it's hilarious. Of course, people have creative names for their pets. And when you combine that with unique last names, it's
Mhm.
hilarious on its own right. But we always refer to our patients by their first name and their last name.
Not to put you on the spot, but
Yeah.
can you think of like a really unusual pet name and last name off the top of your head?
Um, there's Playboy Lawrence. He was one. He ate coins,
Oh.
quarters, nickels, pennies. So he was a big patient. Um, my cat's name, I didn't name him. I adopted him with this name. My cat's name is Johnny Depp. And he was named by a bunch of vet techs I work with. And I have another vet friend of mine who his client brings her cat in, and the cat's name is Patrick Swayze. And
Oh.
he once made the mistake of referring to the cat as Patrick. And she stopped him and interrupted him and said, "No, it's Patrick Swayze." So, they're always amusing names.
Yeah, I love it. Okay. So let's talk about your interest in mysteries in general
Right.
and why you think you went that was the path you wanted to go down when you started writing.
I think it's easy. It's just ever since I was a kid, I'm obsessed with mysteries. I was a latchkey kid in the 70s, and we would come home from school and Scooby-Doo Mysteries was on after school. So it would have started with that. I read every Nancy Drew, like nose in a book, and it's always been mysteries. My grandmother looks like Miss Marple. Actually, she's on the shelf back there, a picture of her. And so even as a young teenager, I read every Miss Marple, more than Hercule Poirot, Agatha Christie.
Mhm.
Um, we used to, when I was a kid, I grew up in a small town in the summer with my grandmother and grandfather, and my best friend and I used to, latchkey kid again, everything, it's Canada, we could do this. We would just go head down Main Street of town and we would choose someone and tail them. So we would try and tail them around town and see if we could, do that without being caught. And one day I don't know, we were scoping something out, creating our own mysteries, and we saw paper bags in the bushes. So we went over and checked them out, and inside there were a bunch of liquor bottles. And so we moved across the street to stake them out. But it was lunchtime, so we had to go home for lunch. I think I was in grade 2 at the time. Had to go home for lunch. And when we came back, the bags were gone. And so we were trying to figure out what to do next to solve this mystery when a gentleman was stumbling across the street carrying bags, and he went and put his bags in the back of his pickup truck and then passed out and rolled under the truck. So we ran to the neighbor's house to call the police, and From that point on, we were sure he was out to get us. So after we had been tailing people all over town, we spent the rest of the summer pretending that this person who didn't know we existed was going to get us for calling the police on him. He probably just went and slept it off for the night, but it was a constant looking for a mystery. So mysteries, that's easy. It was always mysteries. It's been the genre I've read forever. I didn't even think of anything else. The good benefit of meeting a lot of my author friends is people write different genres, and so we often swap books to give in, reader feedback or swap reviews. And so I've been glad I've been forced to read different genres that I have not stepped outside of mystery thrillers for so long. So I've actually got a historical fiction and a sci-fi romance under my belt this month. And I was like, oh, I need to expand my horizons. So for sure. But with limited time in the day, it's always going to be a mystery. That was easy.
Gary's posted up a question about curious about what differentiates a cozy from a mystery, a murder mystery. So you had already addressed part of that, but clarify a little bit more.
Sure. A cozy mystery is basically it's an amateur sleuth. It is a small town setting, usually a quirky cast of characters, and probably the biggest difference is there's nothing graphic in a cozy mystery. No graphic violence, no graphic language, no graphic sex. It is by definition cozy. So that would be different than your normal thrillers or, crime dramas where everything's a little grittier. So it's a beach read. It's light. Even the romance in my book, I mean, I think at some point in time, there's, short kisses. If you ever watch a Hallmark Mystery Channel, they might kiss at the end. That's the extent of the graphic nature of those programs. That's what a cozy is. So I love spy thrillers, but one day.
That do it, Gary?
So going back along those lines, so the first book that you wrote and got feedback on, and they said this is not a cozy.
Right.
What is it? Like, how is it categorized?
It's just a mystery. Probably not a thriller. It's just a mystery.
Okay.
But it's not a cozy because there are professionals involved. It is a bit grittier. There's a bit more violence, and so it does have a quirky small town set in Key West, but yeah, there's no amateur sleuth. A retired special agent is not an amateur.
So do you think that at some point you might pursue that genre of mystery? I know you had mentioned you hope that McNassau will be published someday, but now that you've written both,
right?
Do you have a preference one towards the other? And
no, actually, I would go where the inspiration is. I do love my McNassau story, but when I reread it now, I cringe. I had some good advice given to me by a fellow author early on, and it was you either write 10 novels and your 11th one gets published, or you rewrite the first one 10 times until it gets published. Wow. So I think have done 2 early machinations of that McNassau. So I've got at least 8 more in me, or I'll get there. I have to go back and almost start from scratch, I think, but leave the story intact. Hopefully.
So now let's just talk a little bit more about your first novel came out, or your debut novel came out, and it's not even been a month yet, and it was very well received. And so tell us about, from the point of publish,
right,
to what has happened for you as a writer between then and now. I think some pretty exciting things have happened.
Yes. So it started last year when I got the contract for Trust the Terrier. I was about to start rewriting McNassau, but when I got the contract, in general, the other thing that defines a cozy mystery is there's often a series with all the same characters, almost like Angela Lansbury and Murder, She Wrote. I don't know how many people have been murdered in Cabot Cove, but people want more. So I decided that time that, now's not the time to write McNassau. Now's the time to write a sequel. And I had a story in my mind about how a sequel would run. And so I started writing that. And thanks to the success of the launch of this book, I have received a contract for the number 2 in the series, Coral Shores Veterinary Mystery, and it will be coming out in a year. So February 2025, which I've learned is pretty quick for the publishing world. I'm happy about that. And it's all, the book's already written. So it's in its final edit. And so hopefully when I can get that wrapped up, there'll be a bit of time where I can eventually get back to McNassau.
So, but would you consider writing a third in the Emily Benton series and then be visiting Mick again?
Well, I figure if I have until February 2025 for that second to launch, I have enough time to do both. When I wrote the sequel to Trust the Terrier, I wrote that in 7 months. That was quick. I was inspired. I guess I had time. I'm an empty nester now. There must have been a little bit of time in the schedule for that to happen. So I think I could do both and get them both done over the next year. I do have a story idea for the third. It came about from a Sisters in Crime meeting I went to where we were, our guest was the poison lady, and she's an expert toxicologist talking about how to use arsenic as a poison. And it came up with a great idea for how whoever dies in the third will die. And so I've got about that far. That's it.
All right. Well, cool.
Okay. I have a question for Sharon. Is that the same publisher for your second book?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a week after my launch, I had a great, I guess, sales day. I don't know. They see the numbers. We don't see the numbers. And I got an email titled Urgent Book 2.
That's good.
Yeah. So he says, is it ready? I said, I already told you it's done. Yeah. He wanted to see how things went through the first quarter before signing a sequel, which is legitimate. I'm like, yeah, it's done. And so in 30 minutes, he sent the contract.
Well, that is
I played hard to get. I slept on it overnight and then I signed it the next day.
good for you.
Yeah.
And that is really exciting and definitely happy for you. So we are unbelievably getting close to hitting the hour mark, and I still have so many things that I wanted to chat with you about. So we already know what's next.
Right.
You've got a sequel that's going to be published next year, and you've got you got an idea. It sounds like a great idea for the third, possibly.
Yes.
So I'm very, very excited and curious about that. So what else is going on in your life, either veterinarian wise or writing conferences, appearances, things like that?
Right now it's all about writing appearances. I haven't been able to fit much writing into the past few weeks. Just it's been so busy with the book launch. As I'm navigating social media, I've, kind of being out on the road. I never sit at a desk as a house call vet. So I don't ever have computer time really, but trying to build that into my day. But I have the Sunshine Coast Book Festival coming up next Saturday. That's in Gainesville, Florida. That's 200 authors coming together. It's just an open at the, I think it's the Hilton Conference Center. 2,000 readers just come. It's all genres. It's just a book festival for one day with talks and kids, authors, storytelling. And then the following weekend is Murder in the Magic City.
Yes.
Which is a mystery writers and readers event where they put readers and writers together, put on by the Hometown Library in Birmingham, Alabama. And then that's followed the next day by Murder on the Menu. Again, readers and writers of mystery and thrillers getting together for lunch. So those are the busy ones. Just and keeping up with my day job. I keep saying that my day job keeps getting in the way of my dream job, but really they're both dream jobs. So
yeah. So last any last words? I definitely want to open it up to the audience. If anybody wants to ask anything, please chime in. But I'm curious, for those of us that are would-be writers, do you have any, or not even would-be writers, but writers as well? Do you have any words of advice, any words of encouragement for us?
I would reach out and look in your local neighborhood where you live to find writer groups. And for me, finding the Sisters in Crime group in the Atlanta Writers Club, I don't think I would never have been able to be where I am today without that group of people either inspiring me and educating me, but surrounding me. So I would always recommend to reach out and find a group in where you live in your neighborhood. They're everywhere. It could be critique groups, it could be conferences like what I go to. But when you're in those environments, I always leave them inspired to write. When we attend our Sisters in Crime meetings, I'm sitting there and all I want to do is go home and write. Just talking about it and surrounding yourself with people who aspire to it or have had success with it.
Right.
Is inspiring on its own.
I agree. I agree with that. And I am a reader, not a writer, but being a part of Sisters in Crime has got my wheels turning about actually maybe starting to write or trying to write. But like you, Deborah, I don't have time to shut down from my work to like try to write. So
I can send you the link for Mary Kay Andrews beachside place in Tybee Island.
I think we should have a writer's retreat there. That would be.
I think it has 5 bedrooms. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a fun event. Thank you so much for being here. We had a great audience. We had 10 people that showed up, which is very exciting. For those of you that are here in the audience, once again, I am Dawn Gepfer. I am the host of Off the Shelf, Sisters in Crime Atlanta, and we do this once a month, and it's free, open to the public. You can get more information from our website, which is sistersincrimeatlanta.com. And we hope you will join us again in the future. So, Sharon and Charlie, any last words before we sign off?
Sharon?
There's Rose. Best of luck with the sequel. That's exciting.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah.
It has a title. The title is Parrot Prose, and PROSE, like the talking parrot. And that's another story how I came up with that. But I have a special friend to thank for coming and fleshing out those characters with me and the plot line. That happened over margaritas in Key West, actually.
Good. By the way, Murder in the Magic City in Homewood Library is coming up for some local members of Sisters in Crime too. So not only is Deborah going to be there, but Jeff Shaw. Sharon, are you on a panel?
Liz,
No,
Liz Tully.
I might attend though. I haven't registered yet, but I might go.
I'll be there as an attendee,
and Dawn's going to be there. I cannot go. I'm registered, but I can't go. So Sharon, you're more than welcome to my registration.
Should I just be Charlie? Are we allowed to do that?
Yeah. Well, I'll drop an email to Margaret and just tell.
Okay.
So you want to do that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. It's already paid for, so don't worry about it. But I can't go.
Well, I can pay you back.
All right. Well, real quick, I just want to share something that Gary just posted, and he said his editing critique lady suggests he take one of his characters and create a detective novel, and maybe he's thinking maybe now a cozy. So that's great, Gary. Go for it.
I think we all need a cozy these days, just something light. Day-to-day life is too serious and less fun, so something light is good.
I
Yeah,
agree. All right. Well, again, thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you'll join us in the future. Check out our website and also our Facebook page where we post upcoming, all upcoming events. But that's where you can get information on the next Off the Shelf. So
Thank you, Dawn.
thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you.
Okay.
everyone.
And now how do I stop? I found it. Stop. I
Hey,
don't know if
Mary.
I
Hey,
should-
Dee.
I don't know if I should run tech. I don't know how to do any of this. Stop recording.
I think it probably is automatic if you leave, so.
There we go.